Hey, it's Dougie Fresh in the flesh, here to give you my best with my meditation coach, Coach Bruce.
Aloha Kia Kua.
Yes, he has taught me so much along my journey of going into finding my own authentic voice, which is a process, and he's helped me understand that process. And first, tell him what that means. Aloha Kia Kua.
Aloha Kia Kua is a Hawaiian greeting. It's said at a time of hello or goodbye, and it means God is love.
Wonderful. And could you tell him a little bit more about yourself? Your journey, Hawaii, and everything.
Well, I'm a veteran. I was in the U.S. Navy, and like a lot of people these days, I went through a lot of hard times, and I was very lost. From childhood, started to have lopped on me other people's value systems, other people's negatives, other people's loads, and I carried them until I became very emotionally sick, very spiritually lost. In late 1989, I met a spiritual teacher by the name of Master K, who lived in Hawaii, and through his teachings and many, many authors in self-help and spiritual, like Don Miguel Ruiz, Dan Millman, and many others, I'm definitely a follower of Lao Tzu. And through those teachings and many, many more, over the years, developed my own teaching, which is called The Authentic Life. The basis of it is that most of us, by the time we reach adulthood, are not walking our authentic path. We're on some version of other people's paths due to their expectations, due to their teachings, due to their failings, and we've lost our authentic voice and the path that we were designed, almost like our template. And because that's off, we live in a place disconnected from harmony. So by finding our authentic voice, by walking down our authentic path, by stripping off through meditation and learning all the negatives and all the things that are not really who we were meant to be, we find that path that's then revealed to us.
Wonderful.
That's a capsule.
And that's why I'm getting a lot of help from that, because I'm on that path and I want to strip back and become more authentic, as we all do want to. And my audience is mainly 16-year-old guys, like 22, 24, and I think that's very important for them as well.
Well, what especially at that age, what they need to know, by the time I started down this path, I was 27, 28. I had been in addiction since I was 11 or 12. I had been violent since I was 15 or 16. I had been lost since I was a child. And the cast had died. I was on my way to a life of self-degradation, violence, and hatred, which probably wasn't going to be a very long life. Due to this program, I've overcome financial hurdles, I've overcome addiction hurdles, and I continue to, because that's a lifelong process. I've overcome near-death physical experiences to regain some level of health, which I still continue to work on. And I've gone from a place of self-loathing, self-hatred, and being lost to a place of direction, self-love, and spiritual soaring.
Yes. So my coach here and mentor has obviously walked the path himself. That's why I trust him 100%, and he's given nothing but value to me in our time together. I want to talk about next.
Dougie, if I may.
Yeah.
What's awesome about what we're doing and about your basic client base is, imagine if I didn't have to go through all that I went through and started at 16, 18, 20, 22. Imagine how much less pain I'd go through, how much more direction I'd have. Imagine where I'd be today. Not that I'm not exactly where I belong, but if you're out there and you have any question about where you want to get to, you're in a great place, because most people your age are not even thinking about this. So if you're at a place and you're ready to say, I want to be all that I can be, spiritually, physically, mentally, then you're in a place to start now, not later. Asking these key questions, searching for a new way of life, finding your authentic voice, and then finding that direction, because then, well, the impossible becomes possible.
Woo! That's right. That's very encouraging. and it gives us faith in the unfolding of life, as Dan Millman says, and that's how I define it. Define faith.
Dan's a pretty smart dude.
Yeah, so he's introduced me to mentors like Dan Millman and the Four Agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz, which I've read a few of their books, which has helped me tremendously. How important is it for a young man like my audience to have a mentor? Many of them found out about me through Elliot Holst. But how important is that to find that guidance?
Well,
and what's the paradox between?
First off, it's great to have teachers, because what we don't know, we can't know. But I caution people from having one teacher. Okay? As I said to you when you came to me, take everything I've got, but don't become a Bruce clone, because that's not authentic to you. Dan Millman's one of my greatest influences. The guy has a way of writing that makes you learn without feeling like you're being talked down to. Don Miguel has a grip on relationships and inner self that is just amazing. Lao Tzu, who I consider the father of all of this stuff, taught the way of living life with character, the Tao Te Ching. And it was meant to show people how to rule with character. And it was turned down because they would have to give up their greed and their power in order to follow the path. But what happened was it became the second most published book in the history of the world, behind the Bible itself.
Wow.
You know, simple strengths like Gandhi. Gandhi was never a physically imposing man, did not have a loud orator voice, did not run around and screaming and yelling. In fact, those are all the opposites of what he was. But he looked at the English government, which is one of the most powerful governments in the history of the world, and have been one of the biggest landowners or land takers in our history. And he said that at the end of the day, the will of all of his people will be greater than the will of the few of the English, and they would, without violence, the English government would simply walk out of their country. And lo and behold, after they laughed, after they scoffed, after they brutalized, that's exactly what happened. The will of his spirit and the spirit that followed him simply demanded justice, and they left. That's the kind of spiritual direction that is only found in an authentic path.
Okay. Thank you. And you've helped me keep it simple and helped me through meditation. How important is meditation? Also, how to meditate? A lot of people get confused with that.
Well, there's many forms of meditation. You know, I have a friend whose meditation is his bicycle. He rides 25 miles a day, and when he's done, he's completely empty. Meditation is important for this reason. It's also very misunderstood in the sense that, you know, there's a right or wrong way to do it. Obviously, if it's negative, if it's causing pain, if it's hurting others, that's the wrong way to meditate. Meditation, for me, is as simple as this. Most people walk around in a version of full all day. Full. Well, I want you to imagine that you want to have a cold glass of water. You want it to be clear. You want it to be fresh. You want it to be invigorating. But in the carafe holding where you want to get that water from is milk. It doesn't matter to me how much water you pour into that carafe. You will never get that pure water drink because it has milk in it. You have to empty it, clean it, and have it ready to hold pure water for it to give a pure water drink. So meditation's a lot like emptying and cleaning the carafe. If you're walking around with other things, negative and positive thoughts, noise in your head, noise in your heart, doubts, troubles, teachings of false teachers that you've picked up through actions that were not pure to yourself, then to try to have a pure thought, try to have a pure emotion, try to have an exact emotional response to a situation is almost impossible. Most people react. They react because they're so full that as soon as something hits it, it just ricochets off it, and you get what you get. And often, later on, we're not very happy with those results. But to have a response is different. It's a thought-out process that allows you to show a reaction to others that you actually want, because it's been thought out, because it didn't have to bounce off a full chamber. It entered the chamber, it was processed, and then the response is released. Well, that's a whole other scenario. Meditation allows that. Meditation clears the mechanism. Meditation allows for a purest of thought and a better response.
Yeah, so having that space in between stimulus and response is so key. Right.
Sure.
And listening is a big part of that. Once meditation can help you become calm and still, I found, which can make you become a little better listener. And I found it helps my entire quality of life better. Speaking makes me better, more effective and aggressive. So it gives me both spectrums of intensity, more focused intensity, but just a whole spectrum.
Well, meditation is an action. People think that being passive or spiritual is to be submissive in nature and to be and not to be able to be alpha or to be in action. It's not true. Some of the greatest warriors in the world are people of spirit. Some of the greatest athletes of the world, even in combat sports like football, are absolute spiritual people. When you listen to a Herm Edwards or when you watch in action a Kurt Warner,
Tony Dungy, Tim Tebow,
these are people of spirit, and yet they're also people of great drive. Herm Edwards says all the time the number one ability is availability, which means that you have to be mentally, physically, and spiritually strong at all times to be ready for what's coming. And often when you are, whatever comes is not only handleable, but you can be successful.
When we first met, you talked about my thoughts coming at me a lot slower, and instead of the excitement of them blasting at me, and I can actually grab them a little bit better. And I could be like a running back that takes the weight and parachute off of his back and run a little faster. And I found that to be very true since I started meditation. And how does that happen? How do you get this awareness through meditation?
The first time we sat down, you had 4 books with you.
Right.
You were reading 4 books at once, and what that was creating was you were gaining nothing.
Yeah. Now I get 1 or 2.
You were you can't process duality information in the same moment. I was just on the phone with a person the other day who's struggling with the future, and I forget which teacher said it, but it might have been Lao Tzu. The only 2 days you can't do anything about are yesterday and tomorrow. And this moment that we're in right now, not the moment 5 minutes ago when we were talking about something else, but this moment right here is the only moment you have that you can do anything about. So you can only do something about this moment right here. So if you live this moment right here as the best moment you can, well, then you'll have singular focus and you'll be able to accomplish the most you can. If you try to do something about 2 things right in this moment right here, one of them will get failed. Most of the time, both of them will get failed. You read something like a paragraph. You need to be 100% into that paragraph. The Japanese and Chinese martial artists, going back thousands and thousands of years, have always taught about one mind, to be of one mind, so that when you're attempting a task, that mind is singular and focused, and there is nothing else going on around the rest of the world. Even if you have 10 things to do coming at you right now, you can only do one. So you focus on that one 1,000%. Even if you have to split a second later, you're focusing on that 1,000%. But if you're trying to focus on 2 things at once, often both things don't get done. Meditation allows for that focus.
Okay, great. That's awesome. Could you share us one of your poems that would maybe be great for my audience? He has some phenomenal poems as he gets me in a still state, present mind with his, maybe it's his smells and some drums and musics. He will create that ritual space, and then he'll provide a poem that'll sink a message deeply in my neurology, and I'll really start to marinate on that and kind of meditate on that throughout the week. And it has helped me become a little wiser as I experiment some of his teachings into life. And I find that's a lot better than just reading something in a book. As I experiment it and as I live it, it helps a lot.
Was there a particular one you wanted?
There's a few you've given me. The one with the bull coming down.
Well, that's not actually mine. I can't take credit for it. there was another philosopher, and I don't remember his name, and he wrote about the two bulls sitting on the hill. It's very commonly known to us old folks, and it talked about two bulls sitting on top of the hill, and down in the valley there was a whole bunch of cows, and the one bull simply said, "I'm going to run down there, and I'm going to make love to a cow." And the old bull said, "I'm going to walk down and make love to all of them." And, of course, that comes from a very primal sense of animalistic. We're not condoning, running through women the way the bulls would want to conquer that herd. But what his talk was about was to have a singular focus and to complete a task. I was reminded why I love that is not to do with the sexual connotation, but the singular focus. And I was reminded of it by a mentor of mine in the military. One of the greatest mentors I've ever had. He was also a person of spirit, but given the moment, he could show incredibly aggressive strength when needed as a military man. But he was also a follower of Christ and a person who was very spiritually driven. A lot of people who didn't know the depth of the man didn't know that, because on the surface his intensity was intimidating. It's because his focus was so strong that people with less focus were intimidated. And he once told me, "You're going in too many directions. Go in one at a time. No matter how many directions you have to go in, you'll complete tasks better." His name was Chief Beebe. He became a warrant officer and just a great teacher. He said to me, "If something's worth doing, it's worth doing your absolute best." Charles Levine, my mother's father, owner of a business through the Depression, one of the strongest men I've ever known, often would tell me, "Don't do something unless you're going to give it your best. It's a waste of energy." My father, who's one of my greatest work or life teachers, has always told me it's a waste of time to do anything if you're not going to give it your all. So when I look at these three men, and then I look at these two cultures, Chinese and Japanese cultures, that have mastered martial art forms in a way that they've become almost 100% pure. I think that there's no mistake that people from all these different cultures have the same ideal, and the same ideal is, if you're going to do something, do it your absolute best. Take the time to do it right. So I'll just pick one. It's called Life's Realizations, and it starts out, "In the days of merry men, battling was done now and then. Fighting was gallant, hand and fist. One by one or two by two, they fought to the death or triumphed too. Men whose words were just like steel, their bodies molded from fantasies real. By now it's all changed, I know you see, men and women fighting each other from thousands of miles away, bombs exploding and children dying. Is there anything after today, or will everything just fade away? Ashes to ashes and dust to dust, live together or perish you will. Memories will be all that is left. But there won't be anyone to remember, not after this fight. Probably all that will be seen is a great flash of light. Warriors then were ruthless, that's true, but they lived by a code of honor too. Their honor as men was worthy of life, not just a word to be taken light. Families that lived and fight and work together. They know what it's like to love one another. Today's families just fall apart. They don't feel the pain, not from the deepness of their heart. So much has been lost in the name of modernization. I'd like to go back for some of life's realizations."
Okay. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, sir.
Another thing I want to talk about, I hope you guys caught the message there. I also missed the point with the bull coming down. I thought that the bull fought the other bull, so I'm glad I heard that again. It was a while. That was over a year ago when I first heard that story. So I'm glad I asked about it. So
I think the point would be the same.
The point, yeah, same thing.
If you were going to enter battle, you wouldn't want to exhaust yourself prior to getting to the battle. You'd want to be strategic and conserve energy so that you could, battle. But being a veteran and growing up around violence and other things, it might seem like I'm condoning violence. There's a difference as a spiritual warrior between being able to be a great warrior when it's necessary to protect family, to protect loved ones, to protect yourself, than there is to go out and be an aggressor for the simple point of promoting your ideology or hurting others because you're coming from a negative strength. Um, I find nothing wrong with protecting the people I love. And if somebody would, an aggressor, a criminal, a person, a sick person, somebody were to attack the people I love, I find no problem using physical to meet their aggression with the same or better intensity and skill.
Okay.
That's to say, is I would never lift my hands in violence to do anything but protect the weaker or people that are loved. I see no room for violence just for the sake of hurting others or taking from others.
Yeah, and we have the right to do that too, and we also should be prepared, as you mentioned a while back, plan for the future, and that was the point of the story too. And I'm doing that currently as I move forward into my next venture into Los Angeles, California, and you guys also prepare for your next challenge through planning. And it's also important to be prepared. So if someone did come at you in an aggressive way, if you don't know how to, if you get beat up at the age of 36 and you don't know how to fight, it's your fault because you don't know how to fight. So you have to work on building the skills of a lot of things.
Well, I also don't think we live in a society where you have to fight anymore. You know, when I was younger and emotionally fragile, I found offense in everything. And now, literally, somebody has to touch me in the wrong way, or attack me, or attack someone I care about in order to elicit a physical response. You know, when you wear your ego and pride on your sleeve in a false manner, anyone can start a fight with you. If somebody were to say or do something to me now, they have no authority or power in my life. So there is nothing they can say. They can talk about the women in my family. They can talk about myself. They can even steal from me. And it's probably not going to elicit a physical response, because if I am elicit a physical response, I'm going to put the person down. And that is not a position that I ever want to be in again. So it's reserved only to sustain life or protect. Too many times people talk about being disrespected, and especially in the younger people.
Right.
The only person that can disrespect you is yourself. And if you act out in violence over a foolish person or a petty person, you become just as foolish and petty. I lived my life like that. It's a waste of energy. It's a waste of ego. It's a waste of pride. Most people operate from a sense of false pride. Pride is not walk around with your chest out, your head pumped up with these ideals that you're better than someone. The moment you feel that you're better than someone, you become less than them. It is truly our job to go through life humble and to find, just our path and stay on it. If a person were to jump on my path, even as an aggressor, I'm just going to welcome them. There's two kinds of interactions in the world. Ones that you enjoy and ones that teach you. And if they teach you, there's two choices. One, what to be, and two, what not to be. So there's always a lesson there, and if you derive the lesson and move on. But there's very few situations in life, I found as a spiritual person, that physically fighting is an answer for. And it's amazing, because since realizing that, I haven't been in any fights.
Yeah, and you have more energy probably too because of it.
Well, I'm getting old, so energy's relative.
Yeah, that's right. You have your inner spirit kind of made of that a focus, and you built that, and the ego is huge there. So the ego edging speaking, God out, they call that.
Well, ego is false anyhow.
Mm-hmm.
Ego is your opinion of yourself in an unhealthy manner. Again, going back to the Asian cultures, the true people of spirit, they and even if you want to look in the Christian faith, Jesus didn't walk around with ego. He the only time he spoke of grandeur wasn't speaking of his Father. Well, that was respect, love. ego sets you above people, which again sets you below people.
And there's that emotional reactivity. So you've cultivated some emotional intelligence, which a lot of people lack. So you don't get offended by something. This person doesn't respect me. It's not a big deal to you. There's always going to be that. And I find effective leadership. You do some type of sales, and that's important. So effective leadership. Can you talk about that as well?
Well, Jesus said that to lead anything, a family or any other endeavor, should be done with discernment. Discernment means without incorrect emotion. You look at some of the greatest leaders of all time. Some in war, some in spirit. I mentioned Gandhi earlier. Martin Luther King. John F. Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis. George Washington. With all of George Washington's failings, the first thing they did after fighting for the freedom of our country was offer him to be King George. And even with all of his failings, because George Washington kept slaves. He fought for freedom and enslaved people all at the same time, but knew enough that this country would fall like many other countries were if we didn't have a system that wasn't ruled by a king. So he probably would have been a nice ego stroke, wouldn't you think, to be king of America?
Right.
And instead he took a limited presidency.
Huh.
So sometimes it's about removing your ego and looking. I have a saying that comes from the Authentic Life that says you can be right or you can be part of the solution. And very often you can't be both.
Wow, I'm learning a lot here. I want to talk also about how to become more present. You talk about in the past there's a lot of worry and doubt. In the future is anxiety. You told me once before when I was having a difficult time with my Pittsburgh internship.
When living in the past, the
yeah.
exact quote is, and I think this is Lao Tzu.
Okay.
When living in the past causes depression, when living in the future causes anxiety, and living in the present there's neither.
Calm, confidence, stillness, peace.
Everything's happening right now.
Yeah.
It's a waste of energy to try to do anything. Planning for the future is not the same as living in the future. Planning the future is looking at today and saying, what can I do to make my future better? Nothing wrong with that. But stressing over the future, thinking about tomorrow as if it's now, is wasted emotion, because by the time tomorrow gets here, you won't be the same person you are today. Not if you live today correctly.
Okay. Awesome. One thing that really helped me is positive expectation. And in the Laws of the Spirit, I saw you had on your library up there. He's a great student. And you talked about not following, being careful of the influences you follow. I find Coach here is a student, and to discern with the knowledge you get and the teachers you have. So positive expectations helped me a lot, and that was one of the Laws of Spirit Dan Millman talked about. Do you apply that at all in your life, or
I've
seen it work for some people?
I kind of think expectations are the root of letdown.
Okay.
That's not to say that you can't have something similar like spiritual goals.
Mm-hmm.
But an expectation, when I think of the root of the word, if you put an expectation on yourself that's realistic but takes challenge, fine. If you put an expectations on others, you're probably going to be let down. Because, first off, people don't have the ability to be what you want them to be. And very often, they haven't set the priority to be what you want them to be. They can only be what they want them to be. And as we both know, a large part of the world doesn't sit around and think about any of this. They're kind of on autopilot. And if you're on autopilot and you're not setting priorities based on what other people want from you, and I don't know that you always should. I mean, should I set out to be the best employee I can be for my employer? Yes. Should I set out to be the best husband if I'm married to my wife? Yes. But if to do that I have to do things that go against my value system, is that necessarily the right thing to do long term? Maybe you have the wrong job. Maybe you have the wrong wife. Normally, though, I find most people are attracted to a person trying to be their absolute best. So if in your process you are doing your absolute best and striving to do a little bit better every day, think about exponential math. If I try to do, some people try to conquer the world every day. You can't conquer the world.
Right.
But by exponential math, if I wake up today trying to do just a little bit better, Doug, for tomorrow, And I do that every single day. Well, imagine my progress after 365 days, or
Massive.
3,650 days, or 30,600 days.
Right.
It's just unbelievable. So you just got to do a little bit better every day.
Okay. That seems like a more proper way to have expectations that'll serve, because you're not making assumptions on others, and when they do what they do, other people, you're not taking things personally because you don't expect them to follow your way or your ideas, which is very freeing in the mind.
Absolutely. And I remember an argument my father and I had once.
Okay.
My father's one of the smartest guys I know. Being with him is always enlightening to me, either because he says something or does something that reminds me of just how much I love and respect him, or he does something out of character that makes me go, okay, everybody has to keep working on themselves. But we were in a large argument once, and I was a horrible decision maker back in the day. And my father would try to get me, like a lot of fathers do, and I'm just as guilty of him. I try to be better at this with my son. But he said, well, you never listen to me. You guys hear that from your parents? Mm-hmm. You never listen to us. Certainly. You should listen to us. We know more than you. I said, Dad, I listen to everything you say. Well, you don't do what I say. Well, Dad, you tell me it's advice. See, most people give advice and they get mad at the person when they don't take it. That's not advice. That's a direct order. And if I don't work for you, I'm not taking a direct order. Okay? As a 25-year-old man serving in the U.S. government military in the finest Navy in the whole world, it was not up to me to have to take my father's advice as orders. But that's not important. The important part was that the aggravation factor that he was going through, the stress he was going through, because he expected a grown man to take his advice as a direct order because he happened to be his son. Mm-hmm. And I had to point out to him, Dad, you don't give me advice. And he scoffed and argued until I said the next thing. I said, Dad, advice is free. The person doesn't have to use it. You're just putting it out there because you want the person to consider it. Well, I listened to everything you say, and I made decisions. Some right, some wrong. Some were better than your advice. Most weren't, because you had experience on your hand. But I felt like I had to make my own decisions. If you love me and respect me, what you should have done was say, okay, I gave you a choice. Other people gave you choices. You got input. You made your own decision. It didn't work out. Maybe next time you'll try the other things. But you would go, I told you what to do. Well, that's not advice.
Yeah.
And the funny part is, now, as we've gotten older, sometimes he still does it. But for the most part, that day I became the teacher, because from that point on, he would tell me, somewhat with ego, but normally with just caring, because he is a very caring man. He would tell me, listen, this isn't advice. I want you to do this. Mm-hmm. And I would say yes or no. But when it was advice, he kind of started to grasp the idea that it was still my decision. And I make some bad ones still today. I always will. But I aspire to make better ones.
Appreciate your honesty and humility, and that's exactly what I mean. Perfect example of effective leadership and that emotional intelligence coming through again there.
Well, how can you lead if you don't know how to follow? I mean, if somebody intends to lead but they can't follow, then how do they know the qualities of leadership?
What makes someone a good, not so much follower, but student? I find to be a student is better than follower. What makes someone a good follower or student?
Openness and willingness.
Openness and willingness.
You have to be open to new ideas and willing to try things.
Huge. Definitely. It's helped me a lot in my life. What do you think of and reflect on your own life? How it has served you?
Well, I have 28 years in management positions. And in the last couple of years, due to just some life situations, I've had to take non-management positions. Mm-hmm. So in those non-management positions, if I acted like a manager, I would be fired pretty quickly. Upon leaving a job that I was qualified to be my boss, I had as much qualification as he did. I was leaving for another opportunity. I asked him, I said, let me ask you a question. I said, we both have strong personalities. I'm sure we butted heads a little bit. I said, did you ever feel like I thought I knew more than you, or I wasn't willing to follow your direction? And he laughed and he said, when I hired you, because you have a very strong sense of self, and you have the same resume as I do. In fact, it's more varied. He goes, I was really concerned that I was going to tell you what to do and you were going to say no. You have a better way to do it, and you never did that. And he said, he says we don't do things the same. And I will tell you, sometimes I was very frustrated when you did it. But any time that I said to you, hey, this is how this is to be done, you didn't do what the other guys do in getting upset. You just simply did it to your best ability. And if you couldn't do it, you'd come to me and say, look, I'm having trouble doing this. I want to do it your way. Here's a way I know how. Am I allowed to do it that way, or should I continue to struggle doing it the other way? But whatever my decision was, he said, you always proceeded in that manner. Here's something for the younger people in the world that I want you to know about the workplace. It's not your company unless it's your company. When you're an employee of someone, it doesn't matter if you're right, because the person who has the goal makes the rules. So your owner says, I want to do this way. And the supervisor doesn't feel it's the right way. It doesn't matter. It's the owner's company. So he tells the supervisor says, well, boss, what do you think about this way? That's a pretty good way. There's two choices. You're going to find most of the time there's two choices. And the owner says, yes, do it my way, or yes, do it your way. Once he's made that decision, the supervisor then goes down to the deck plate level people and says, listen, we're going to do this way. One of the deck plate level people says, that's stupid. Well, he just called his boss stupid. Not a good tact. So if you want to be part of the solution, you have to first learn to follow orders. People see these videos about boot camp and they're like, oh my God, it's ridiculous. You can't talk to people that way. You can't do things. You can't do things. In war, in the military, in damage control conditions on a ship, in a fire, your response time means lives. When you see a professional firefighting crew coming out of your local neighborhood and they're at a fire, it's not a democracy. The on-scene leader, the fire marshal, are in charge. What they say, you do. If they're wrong, you do it anyhow. Afterwards, when the fire's out, then you can discuss better ways. The next day in training, then you can discuss better ways. But you don't try to implement policy in the heat of the battle, because people die when you do that. Well, when you transfer that over to the workplace, you have the right to ask your boss if there's time, if there's a better way. But if they make a decision, if you want to prosper at that company, you show them you can soldier on and you do what you're told.
That's so helpful.
Willingness and, what's the other one I said?
Openness.
Openness and willingness. Open to take somebody else's direction and willingness to carry out the task.
It's win-win. You learn from it if you try that anyway. That's what I'm making a practice now while I went to strength camp and as I'm going to work under Mark Dama and trying to practice other people's ways and experiment what's working for them and integrate it into my own to make it more authentic and having help.
Bruce Lee had a confrontation with the elder Chinese in San Francisco when he wanted to open his school to non-Asians. They called us the Guaido. And they did not like us because of the way Asians were treated in the 1800s when they came over here to work for the railroads and stuff like that. And they were treated subhuman.
Okay.
They said they don't like us, we can't trust them with our martial arts knowledge, they'll use it against us. At the time, there was no Asian martial arts studios open throughout the country for non-Asians. Bruce Lee said to them, they're afraid of us because they don't know us. They don't know the beauty and love of our culture. If we open it up to them, everything will change. That's openness and willingness. They scoffed at him. Have you driven down the street anywhere in this country in the years since Bruce Lee's gone? There's taekwondo, jiu-jitsu, kung fu everywhere, being taught by whites, Asians, blacks, to anyone who has the mind of getting better. One man birthed that with his openness and willingness to show his culture to others.
Magnificent. So let's move forward.
That was his authentic voice.
Openly and willingness, with willingness. Few more things.
Okay.
Process. I find in my own personal life sometimes I have a difficult time. I might be too tied to an outcome and can't fully enjoy the process. I can become present almost when I choose, as I practice some of the teachings of you and other teachers. How can we enjoy the process more and make that a focus? Because I know when I do focus on the process, enjoy it, be myself, be my best self, things go much better. They're more effective. Have you found ways to just flow with the process, let go and flow and become your authentic self?
You have to fall in love with the task at hand. Using the Japanese as an example, go on YouTube. Anybody, I don't care how old you are.
You'll be watching this on YouTube.
And watch the process of a tea service, a traditional tea service. And watch the hand motions and the speed and the exactness of making a cup of tea. If you can't fall in love with a task, its outcome is in peril anyhow. But when you fall in love with the idea of perfecting each task in any situation, whether you're an auto mechanic, a trash collector, a physician, a surgeon, an astronaut, a meditation coach, and you look at every detail, and you choose to do your absolute best at every detail, even if you don't see the importance, especially when you don't see the importance. Not when you agree with them, but especially when you don't agree with them. The outcome becomes a byproduct of your effort.
Wow. Yeah, so make meaning in it, almost. Alchemize it. What I do is I turn it to something maybe negative into positive. I'll create some fun game out of it. But that lasts for a while, and then if I could implement that, which is key, just focusing on each thing and giving that effort, it gets me in that flow state where it becomes timelessness, it becomes bliss, it becomes stillness and just enjoying the process fully and letting go and enjoying it and doing that hard work. And in the hard work, you find some enjoyment, and that time seems to pass a lot better. You're not waiting, looking at the clock, waiting for things to go better. That's key.
Have you ever known anybody who gets bored the minute they don't have something to do?
Oh, yeah.
You're not bored. You're not bored. You can't be bored 5 seconds after something just stopped.
Mm-hmm.
But you've trained your mind to believe you need to be entertained by a small shiny object or a bauble.
Shift that.
When a grown person does that, it's because they haven't mastered the discipline of the moment.
Yeah.
When you live in the moment, something's always happening. Right now, during this interview, there's something happening all around us. There's what you have to say. There's what I have to say. Is it when you're talking, I'm listening. When I'm listening, you're talking. And there's the people who are watching this. There's my dog in the bathroom when they get out.
The air conditioner hum.
There's things happening everywhere.
Yeah.
So, true spirit is about living in this moment in a complete state. Right now, the only thing that's going on in my life is this interview. So I'll do this interview to my absolute best. When the interview is over, I'll proceed on to the next thing, and I'll be doing that at my best.
That's super fantastic.
Super fantastic.
Yes, let's also implement that centered focusness in our own life. That's fantastic. Yeah. Another last thing I wanted to ask, you taught me, and Tim Millman taught me this, was true wisdom is action, is doing. Not knowledge is just knowing something, and I've had this, but each coach challenged me to do more from experience, so go get that experience, and I think that's where a lot of us are at. Could you expand on that idea of
Sure.
that?
So I'll use an example in a story. It was in the military.
Perfect.
So a guy comes out of school, and he had an extended school that I never had. And I'm an E5, second class petty officer, and he's an E4. Now, I never went to the school, so I got my rank out on a ship working 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He got his boot camp because he picked the school. They skipped over 2 to 3. Then graduating the school, still hasn't been on a ship or done anything but be in class. They gave him E4. So I outranked him only by 1 stripe. But I had 2.5 years experience of working and leading people and doing the job, and he had 0. So I told everybody what to do about a certain function, and he said, that's not the right way to do it. And he'd been on the ship for less than a week. And I was not a nice person then. I was not a good leader then. I was still effective at getting results because I outworked everybody and you had to keep up with me. Which is a management style. It's not the nicest. And I barked at him and I said, well, what are you basing this on? You'd have never done the job. He said, I just spent a year in school. Now, I completely disavowed anything he did in school and treated him like garbage. And I was wrong for that. He completely disavowed my rank and the fact that I had been doing it for 2.5 years in a practical sense. So we both came from a wrong place. And when two people are coming from a wrong place, they're going to have a wrong outcome.
Lose-lose.
And it went very, very badly. But because of the rank, he was forced to do it my way. Later on, in retrospect, he came up and apologized and said, I don't know how that worked. And I said it worked that way because that's how it's done in the fleet. And out here, we don't worry about what's right in the book. We worry about what actually works to get the job done. Because when you're 500 miles out to sea, mistakes cost lives.
Yeah.
He understood. Later in life, when I got clean and I started learning spirituality, I looked him up. And I said to him, hey, hop in my Jeep. And he said, I don't want to talk to you at all. And I said, please get in the Jeep. And he said, Petty Officer Cohen, I don't like you. I want nothing to do with you. You humiliated me for years. I just want to be left alone. And I said, that's why I want you to get in the Jeep. And he looked at me like, you are the most confusing and annoying person I've ever met in my life. And I said, Petey, get in the Jeep. So he gets in the Jeep and I drive him to the house, and we walk in. My girlfriend knew what was going on because I had called her, and she had food laid out, and I go, please eat. And he said, what do you want to say to me? And now you brought me very far from the base. I said, please eat. And he goes, I don't want to eat. I said, please eat. So he sat down, and he ate, and the food was very good. And there was conversation, but nothing important. And then he liked my girlfriend, and they were talking, and I was talking to him. We were all getting along great. And he said, come on over to the outside and let's have a cigar. So we're sitting there smoking our cigars. And he says, why am I here? I said, I wanted to apologize to you for the past. And he said, why didn't you just do that by the Jeep? And I said to him, if I apologize, Pete, look, I just really want to apologize for you, everything that happened, and drove away, what chances do you think there are that you're going to, A, consider it, and B, accept it? Or that you even believe I meant it? The person I knew the message was going to fall on deaf ears. So, I bring him to my home. I introduce him to the most important lady in my life. I feed him. I talk to him. I offer him a $10 cigar. These are all trinkets. Trinkets to show him that whatever I'm about to tell him, I mean. Then I sit there and I, from my heart, go into a heartfelt apology, explaining that it wasn't him. It was me. Explaining that I was lost. Recognizing that the things he did that were wrong were amplified by the fact that everything I did was wrong. My intent was always good, but my actions were bad because I never came from one mind. I never came from the right place. I never came from a place of positive energy. All I cared about in my selfishness was advancing my ego, advancing my state on the ship, advancing the self-proclamation of greatness of Bruce, which usually led in the demise of the greatness of Bruce.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And we can all learn from that experience, and forgiveness is huge and freeing, I find. And I'm sure you felt that way afterwards.
I didn't do it for him.
Yeah, you did it for yourself. That's right.
Every time I hurt someone or do someone wrong, I carry that with me, whether you're insensitive and you don't think you're feeling it or not. And when you carry enough of those around, it weighs down your spirit. slows you down. It makes you feel like you're chained. When you start making amends, when you start letting go of them, when you start forgiving people for how they trespass against you, when you start to forgive yourself for how you trespass against them, your spirit grows, your abilities flourish. And instead of having to tell people how great you are, which you normally can't keep up with, they form their own opinion that you're pretty damn good. And you just keep working at being better.
I hope you guys get everything out of this. If you get one thing, make it be that. Because that's why I have such tremendous reverence for my coach here, because he's a great soul. And is there any last things you want to share with my friends out there?
Please visit theauthenticlife.us. My phone number is 610-247-5294. I'm available for Skype sessions. I'll be centered out of Lakeland, Florida, if you'd like to do in-person meditation or life coaching. Have a wonderful day, and aloha kia kua.
Yeah, his link will be right below, and if you have other short poem you'd like to share with him, it would be great too.
Take one out?
Yeah, let's do another short poem.
Okay.
The link is below of his website, and he has more poems there you could look at, and his work of speaking he's done. He has done magnificent, marvelous meditation sessions with me. He's very dynamic. It's important to have a coach or a mentor in this space, and I give you him. He has great judgment, so check him out. And let's see what else he has for us today.
The difference between you and I, the wise man said as the little man scratched his head, is that you ask questions of me, expecting to learn all, when I have knowledge of really nothing at all. A learned man, yes indeed, I know a lot compared to that of an unread or a commoner. But this world is a vast amount of knowledge, and any man who claims to know everything in reality knows little worthwhile. The little man looked at him in bewilderment. He came to learn, but found a wall in a simple statement. Then the wise man said with a smile, "Why not just sit and listen for a while?" But this man said nothing, and the little man got up to leave. But then he thought otherwise. He looked into the eyes of the man known to be wise, and found there was nothing ever to let it be known there was even life. But life there was, and with it there was peace. The little one looked around, but wilderness to his eyes were found. He listened and heard nothing. Dismay fell over him. As the wind began to sting, the old man seemed to smile. That only served to cause the little one to get frustrated more. Much time passed as they sat, then all at once there was a change. Things started moving in that empty wilderness. He heard life in the hills that before seemed to have nothing going on. He did not understand how this change came about, but he was happier and showed it by his posture, being more upright. The eyes he now looked into said everything, but still the wise man said nothing. And then, alas, he quietly spoke. Do you understand now it is not smart to look unless to see? It won't help to hear if you aren't willing to listen. With the understanding you have now, you can do anything. You know about the winter as well as the spring. Go now and learn, because now you can. Learning how was all you ever needed anyhow.
Wow, learning how was all you ever needed anyhow. Outstanding. Thank you. Infinite thanks, Coach Bruce. Bye, guys. Stay fresh. Stay blessed.